Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode, we're going to be breaking down Blake Watson, running back out of Memphis. We're going to be looking at him based on his production profile and other sort of metrics to kind of see where he lands in this particular draft class. One interesting note, Watson was first team All AAC in 2023. With all this stuff out of the way, let's get to his production profile. So first off, looking at offensive market share scores. If you're new to the channel, new to the stuff that I do, the way that I get offensive market share scores is I take an individual statistic, I divide it by the team total statistic to give a offensive market share score. This number is then given a percentile score. You add age to it a little bit to give you that particular number. So an example of that would be if a running back had 5 touchdowns on a team that had 50 touchdowns, then he had 10% touchdown market share. That number is then compared to, again, all the prospects in the database to give you that number. Now, moving on to his offensive market share production scores. Blake Watson had a 70 percentile total offensive market share production score, 86 percentile in terms of his passing yardage market share production score, and a 66 percentile in terms of his touchdown market share production score. All those numbers are out of 2,312 running backs since the 1969 NFL draft class. And all those numbers also pretty much hit all the starter averages that you're looking for at the position, and even eclipse some of the Pro Bowl averages as well. So his production, just based on his market share data, was very impressive. Taking a look at his running back efficiency scores. Now, efficiency scores take a look at things such as touchdown percentage, which is the number of touchdowns per touch, as well as yards per touch as a rusher, and also yards per reception as a passer, as a pass catcher. And based on his efficiency scores, he also tested pretty well. His rushing yards per reception were very high as a pass catching running back. His yards per rush were a little not as high, and then his touchdown percentage was very high in the 80 percentile in terms of those particular numbers. So not only was he a very productive back, he also was a very efficient back, which I think is a very important thing that you're looking for at the running back position. Moving on to adjusted production scores. Adjusted production takes a look at things like the age of a prospect, the team that he played on, and also the strength of schedule. And all it's really doing is just trying to figure out, okay, how productive was he for how old he was? How productive was he for the team that he was on? And how productive was he for the level of competition that he faced at that particular school? And based on those numbers, again, on adjusted production numbers, he did fairly well with the exception of his age. His age is 37.18 out of 100, which is pretty low for running backs. You typically want them to be a lot younger. His MSA rating, which is the number that takes out his efficiency scores, was 71.43, and his pass score, which includes his efficiency scores, put him at about 74.20 out of 100. When you look at his adjusted production, again, adjusting for his level of competition and his age and those other sort of factors, he did not quite do as impressively based on those numbers. So in many ways, he's a very productive running back who didn't quite have the production in context that was as good as it needed to be. So if he was much more productive for his level of competition and for his age, he would have tested a lot better, essentially. Moving on to some comparisons for him. The comps for him are based on running backs who tested similar, who had a similar EAVS, which is expected approximate value score. Looking at this particular metric, he's in a similar vein of other backup running backs. So Liddell Betts, Pierre Thomas are kind of like the high-end versions of him. D'Angelo Henderson, Sony Michel, Puka Williams, Akeem Hunt. The names go on, but for the most part, again, these are like backup rotational running backs. Those are the types of backs that he tested most similar to based on his data. Which gets to the overall outlook. So I think Blake Watson profiles as a starter, or I should say as a backup to starting receiving back. He could become a team's main option at running back, but most backs with this profile are career rotational backs. The upside potential is, say, a Pierre Thomas or a Liddell Betts type in the NFL if he tests well as an athlete, because that's one thing that Liddell Best and Pierre Thomas at least did, was also test well as athletes. So will be interesting to see where he goes and what happens with him. But that's Blake Watson in a nutshell. He does have good production data overall. It's just the level of competition he had and his age as a prospect are things that lower his overall projection overall. So, with all this stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. You can follow my other work at Gymmetrics on Twitter or X. You can also check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/jcoburn. That's JCOBERN. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.